The alien commander named Zurn stepped out of his spacecraft, its smooth metallic surface gleaming under the bright sun. The air was crisp and carried a faint scent of grass mixed with metal from nearby vehicles. Around him, soldiers stood in neat rows, their uniforms pressed and polished to perfection. They watched silently as Zurn emerged, his tall, insect-like body towering over them. His elongated limbs moved gracefully, and his large, multifaceted eyes scanned the crowd with curiosity. He didn't speak right away, but instead took a moment to observe everything around him. Fort Valor, one of Earth's most respected military academies, stretched out before him. It was a sprawling complex filled with wide-open training fields, sturdy brick buildings, and flags fluttering gently in the breeze. This place was where humanity trained its future leaders, people who would command armies, make life or death decisions, and shape the destiny of their species. Zurn had been sent here by his council to learn more about humans, their methods, and their potential for cooperation among the stars. But already, he could sense something strange in the atmosphere, something that made him uneasy. Among the gathered crowd stood Alex Carter, a young cadet barely out of his teenage years. Alex was lean but strong, with short brown hair and sharp blue eyes that always seemed to be searching for answers. Today, however, they were fixed on Zurn. Like everyone else, Alex couldn't help but stare at the alien visitor. Zurn looked nothing like any human Alex had ever seen. His exoskeleton shimmered faintly, catching the sunlight in ways that made it seem almost otherworldly. For all his awe, though, Alex felt a pang of nervousness deep inside. What if this alien judged humanity harshly? What if he decided they weren't worthy of joining the galactic community? Nearby, Lieutenant Emma Hayes stood with her arms crossed. She was older than Alex, probably in her early 30s, with shoulder-length blonde hair tied back into a tight ponytail. Her expression was calm and professional, but there was a flicker of tension in her green eyes. Emma had been chosen to act as Zurn's guide during his visit, which meant she bore the responsibility of making sure things went smoothly. She knew how important this mission was, not just for Fort Valor, but for humanity as a whole. If Zurn returned home with a negative impression, it could set back years of diplomatic efforts. "Welcome to Fort Valor," Emma said finally, stepping forward. Her voice was steady, though not without warmth. "We're honored to have you here." Zurn tilted his head slightly, a gesture that might have passed for a nod. His voice came out low and resonant, unlike anything human ears were used to hearing. "Thank you, Lieutenant Hayes. I am eager to learn about your people and your ways." Emma gestured toward the academy grounds. "If you'd like, we can start with a tour. You'll get to see our facilities, meet some of our cadets, and understand how we train our soldiers." "That sounds acceptable," Zurn replied. Without waiting for further instructions, he began walking alongside Emma, his long strides forcing her to quicken her pace to keep up. Behind them trailed a small group of officers and cadets, including Alex, who struggled to contain his excitement. This was history in the making, a real alien visiting their academy, and Alex wanted to soak up every detail. As they walked, Zurn asked questions, his tone polite yet probing. "How do you select those who attend this institution?" he inquired. Emma glanced at him briefly before answering. "We look for individuals with strong character, physical fitness, and a desire to serve. Not everyone makes the cut, but those who do are committed to protecting others." Zurn nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "And what qualities do you value most in your soldiers?" "Discipline," Emma replied without hesitation. "Without discipline, even the strongest or smartest person will falter under pressure. We teach them to follow orders, work together, and never give up, no matter how hard things get." Alex listened intently, feeling a surge of pride. Discipline was something he prided himself on. Back when he first joined the academy, he had struggled to adapt to the strict routines and grueling exercises. But over time, he had grown stronger, both physically and mentally. Now standing here while an alien evaluated their way of life, Alex hoped Zurn would see the dedication and effort that went into becoming a soldier. Their tour took them past several key areas of the academy. First, they visited the parade ground, where dozens of cadets marched in perfect formation. Their boots hit the ground in unison, creating a rhythmic sound that echoed across the open space. Zern watched closely, noting how each movement was precise and synchronized. There was no room for error, no deviation from the expected pattern. To him it seemed almost mechanical, as if these humans had traded individuality for uniformity. Next, they stopped at the obstacle course, a challenging setup designed to test endurance and problem-solving skills. Cadets scrambled over walls, crawled through mud, and swung across ropes strung high above the ground. Some stumbled, slipping and falling, only to pick themselves back up and try again. Alex recognized a few of his classmates among them, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat but still determined to finish. "What is the purpose of this exercise?" Zern asked, tilting his head curiously. "It's meant to push them beyond their limits," Emma explained. "In combat situations, soldiers often face extreme conditions. This prepares them for that." Zern remained silent for a moment, watching as a young woman named Rachel climbed a rope ladder with visible effort. Her hand slipped twice, but she refused to let go. Finally, she reached the top and rang a bell triumphantly. A cheer erupted from the other cadets below. While Zern appreciated the determination he saw, he couldn't ignore the underlying message. Failure was not an option. Every action was measured, every mistake corrected immediately. It struck him as a system built on fear. The fear of weakness, the fear of letting others down, the fear of being left behind. Was this truly the foundation upon which humanity based its strength? After leaving the obstacle course, the group moved on to the classrooms. Here, cadets sat attentively as instructors lectured on topics ranging from battlefield tactics to leadership principles. One lecture caught Zern's attention in particular. The topic was psychological warfare, and the instructor spoke passionately about exploiting an enemy's fears and doubts. According to him, winning battles wasn't just about superior firepower. It was about breaking the opponent's spirit. Zern leaned closer to Emma, his antennae twitching slightly. "Do you believe it is honorable to attack someone's mind rather than their body?" Emma hesitated, unsure how to respond. "It's complicated," she said after a pause. "War isn't always fair. Sometimes you have to use every tool available to protect your own side. But does it not create cycles of hatred?" Zern pressed. "If you destroy an enemy's will to fight, do they not seek revenge later?" Emma opened her mouth to reply, but then closed it again. She hadn't considered the question quite like that before. In truth, she wasn't sure she had an answer. By Sue. The end of the day, Zern had seen enough to form a preliminary impression. Humanity was a species driven by ambition and resilience, capable of incredible feats when united. Yet beneath the surface lay a darker truth, a culture deeply rooted in conflict and competition. As he retired to his temporary quarters, Zern couldn't shake the feeling that he had glimpsed only the beginning of something far more complex, and perhaps far more troubling, than he had anticipated. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Fort Valor. The cadets continued their drills, unaware of the thoughts swirling in the alien commander's mind. Tomorrow would bring new observations, new challenges, and perhaps new revelations. For now, Zern simply observed, his keen eyes reflecting the fading light of the human world. The next morning, Zern woke early. His quarters were quiet and dimly lit, with only the soft hum of Earth's technology filling the air. He had spent much of the night thinking about what he had seen so far. The humans at Fort Valor were disciplined, strong, and clearly dedicated to their training. But there was something unsettling about how they approached conflict, how they seemed to embrace it rather than avoid it. Zern wasn't sure if this was a sign of strength or a flaw that could lead to disaster. After a brief meal prepared by the academy staff, Zern met Lieutenant Emma Hayes in the main courtyard. She greeted him with a polite smile, though her eyes betrayed a hint of nervousness. Today would be another full day of observation, and Emma was determined to show Zern the best aspects of the academy. She hoped he would leave with a positive impression of humanity. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Are you ready for today's activities?" I am, Zern replied, his voice calm but curious. What will we see first? Emma gestured toward a large field where cadets were already assembling. We're starting with combat drills. It's one of the core parts of our training program. Zern nodded and followed her to the field. As they approached, he noticed a group of cadets, stretching and preparing for exercise. Among them was Alex Carter, who looked up briefly and caught Zern's gaze. For a moment their eyes met, and Alex felt a strange mix of excitement and intimidation. He quickly returned his focus to the drill instructor barking orders. Sergeant Kyle Monroe stood at the front of the group, his broad shoulders and stern expression commanding attention. He was a man who believed in tough love, pushing cadets to their limits to prepare them for real-world challenges. Today's drill involved hand-to-hand combat, a test of skill, reflexes, and endurance. "Pair up," Monroe shouted. "Show me what you've got." The cadets quickly formed pairs, and soon the sound of fists hitting padded gloves filled the air. Zern watched intently as two cadets, one male and one female, faced off against each other. Their movements were fast and precise, each strike aimed to outmaneuver the other. The crowd of onlookers cheered whenever someone landed a solid hit. "What is the purpose of this?" Zern asked Emma, his tone thoughtful. "It teaches them how to defend themselves without relying on weapons," Emma explained. "In close quarters, combat, quick thinking, and physical skill can mean the difference between life and death." Zern nodded slowly, though he still seemed uncertain. "And do you believe violence is necessary for survival?" Emma hesitated. "Not always," she admitted. "But in some situations it is unavoidable. Our soldiers need to be prepared for anything." As the drill continued, Zern observed the expressions on the cadets' faces. Some looked determined, others frustrated, but none appeared afraid. They threw themselves into the exercise with unwavering intensity, refusing to back down even when they grew tired or made mistakes. To Zern, it was both impressive and concerning. These humans didn't shy away from pain or exhaustion. They embraced it almost as if suffering was a badge of honor. After the combat drill, the group moved to a different part of the academy, the simulation room. This was where cadets practiced tactical decision-making in lifelike scenarios, created using advanced holographic technology. Zern stepped inside the darkened chamber and watched as a virtual battlefield materialized around them. Soldiers appeared on screen, along with tanks, helicopters, and enemy forces. "This is incredible," Zern murmured, his antennae twitching slightly. Emma smiled proudly. "It's one of our most valuable tools. Cadets can experience realistic combat situations without putting themselves in actual danger." A young woman named Natasha Brooks took charge of the simulation. She was confident and sharp-tongued, known among her peers for her strategic mind. As the leader of the virtual squad, she directed her teammates to flank an enemy position while calling in air support. Her voice was steady, her commands clear and decisive. Zern watched closely as the scenario unfolded. The cadets worked together, seamlessly adapting to unexpected challenges and making split-second decisions. When the simulation ended, Natasha turned to Emma with a satisfied grin. "We won," she announced. "No casualties." "Well done," Emma replied, nodding approvingly. But Zern frowned. "And what happens when there are casualties?" he asked. "Do you not consider the lives lost in such battles?" Natasha shrugged. "It's just part of the job. You can't win every fight without taking risks." Zern fell silent, his expression unreadable. He understood the logic behind her words, but they troubled him nonetheless. To Natasha, and perhaps to many humans, losses were acceptable as long as the overall mission succeeded. To Zern, however, the idea of sacrificing lives so casually felt wrong. Later that afternoon, Zern attended a classroom session led by Colonel A. Ryan Dawson, the head of Fort Valor. The topic was planetary defense strategies, and the room was packed with cadets eager to learn. Dawson paced back and forth as he spoke, his booming voice echoing off the walls. "Our enemies are cunning and relentless," Dawson declared. "They will stop at nothing to destroy us. We must be smarter, faster, and stronger. Preemptive strikes may be our best option in certain cases. Zern leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued. Preemptive strikes? He repeated. You mean attacking before being attacked? That's correct, Dawson said, turning to face the alien visitor. If we know an enemy plans to harm us, why wait for them to strike first? By acting decisively, we can neutralize the threat before it grows. The cadets nodded in agreement, scribbling notes as Dawson elaborated on his points. Zern, however, felt a growing unease. He imagined a galaxy where every species adopted this mindset, striking first out of fear or suspicion. How could peace ever exist in such a world? When the lecture ended, Zern lingered behind while the cadets filed out of the room. Emma stayed with him, sensing his discomfort. Is everything all right? She asked gently. Zern sighed softly. Your people seem to view conflict as inevitable. Yet I wonder, have you ever considered another way? A path that does not involve constant preparation for war? Emma thought for a moment before answering. I think most of us dream of a world without war. But until that day comes, we have to be ready. Ignoring the possibility of danger would only leave us vulnerable. Zern nodded slowly, though he still looked troubled. Perhaps, he said quietly, but readiness should not come at the cost of compassion. That evening, Zern joined Emma for a walk through the academy grounds. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers. For a while, neither of them spoke, content to simply enjoy the peaceful atmosphere. Eventually, Emma broke the silence. You've been asking a lot of questions today, she said with a small smile. Do you always analyze things so deeply? It is my nature, Zern replied. My species values understanding above all else. Only by learning can we grow. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I suppose that's something we have in common. Humans are curious too. We always want to explore, discover, and improve. Yes, Zern agreed. But your curiosity often leads to conquest. My kind prefers cooperation. Emma glanced at him, surprised by the comment. Do you think we're incapable of working together? I do not know yet, Zern admitted. But I sense a great deal of tension within your society, a focus on dominance rather than unity. Before Emma could respond, they heard footsteps approaching. It was Alex, who had been searching for Zern. He stopped a few feet away, looking hesitant but eager. Commander Zern, he began cautiously. I was wondering, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you something. Zern tilted his head curiously. Of course, Cadet Carter. What is it? Alex took a deep breath. Back home before I came here, I used to wonder why we fight so much. Why can't we just talk things out instead of going to war? Is that silly of me? Zern studied the young man for a moment, then shook his head. No, it is not silly. Questions like yours are vital. Without them, progress cannot happen. Alex smiled faintly, relieved to hear those words. Thanks, he said softly. I guess I just needed to hear that. As Alex walked away, Emma turned to Zern. You handled that well, she remarked. He's a good kid, but sometimes he doubts himself. He has potential, Zern said. Potential to question, to challenge, to change. Those qualities are rare and valuable. The three of them parted ways shortly afterward, each lost in their own thoughts. For Zern, the day had been enlightening but also troubling. Humanity was a complex species full of contradictions. They were capable of great courage and kindness, yet their obsession with conflict worried him. As he returned to his quarters, Zern wondered if there was hope for a brighter future, or if humanity's darker instincts would ultimately define them. The third day of Zern's visit began with a quiet morning. The alien commander rose early, as was his habit, and spent some time reflecting on what he had seen so far. The humans at Fort Valor were disciplined, resourceful, and deeply committed to their training. Yet the more he observed, the more he noticed how much of their lives revolved around preparation for war. It wasn't just about protecting themselves. It seemed to be part of who they were. Zurn couldn't help but wonder if this focus on conflict was a strength or a flaw. After breakfast, Lieutenant Emma Hayes joined him in the courtyard. She greeted him warmly, though her expression hinted at a mix of pride and apprehension. Today's schedule included tours of the Academy's historical monuments and archives, areas that showcased humanity's past achievements and its struggles. Emma hoped these visits would give Zurn a broader perspective on why humans valued strength and resilience so highly. "We're starting with the Hall of Heroes," Emma said, gesturing toward a large brick building nearby. "It's where we honor those who gave their lives in service." Zurn nodded, intrigued. He followed Emma inside, where walls were lined with plaques, photographs, and artifacts from Earth's many wars. Each display told a story of sacrifice, bravery, and loss. Cadets occasionally stopped by to pay their respects, standing silently before the memorials. Emma pointed to one plaque dedicated to a soldier named Captain Daniel Myers. "He led his team into enemy territory during a critical mission," she explained. "They succeeded, but he didn't make it back." Zurn studied the plaque carefully. "And you celebrate him for this?" "Yes," Emma replied. "We remember those who gave everything to protect others. Their actions inspire us to be better." Zurn tilted his head thoughtfully. "But do you not see a contradiction? You honor those who die in battle, yet you say you strive for peace." Emma hesitated, unsure how to respond. "I suppose it's complicated. War has shaped our history, and we don't forget the cost. But we also hope for a future where such sacrifices aren't necessary." Zurn remained silent, absorbing her words. He could understand the sentiment behind honoring fallen soldiers, but to him, it still felt like glorifying something that should be avoided. His own species had once celebrated conquests and victories, only to nearly destroy themselves in the process. They had since learned to value cooperation over conflict, and Zurn wondered if humanity could ever follow a similar path. Later, the group moved to the Academy Library, which housed countless books, documents, and records detailing Earth's military history. Alex Carter tagged along, eager to learn more about Zurn's perspective. While Emma guided Zurn through the aisles, Alex wandered off to explore on his own. Zurn paused at a section filled with accounts of famous battles. He picked up a book titled The Art of War and flipped through its pages. The text described strategies for defeating enemies, emphasizing deception, speed, and aggression. Zurn frowned slightly, finding the advice unsettling. To him, it seemed less about achieving victory and more about ensuring domination. "Do your people study these ideas often?" Zurn asked Emma, holding up the book. She nodded. "It's considered a classic. Many leaders throughout history have used its teachings to guide their decisions." "And do you agree with its principles?" Zurn pressed. Emma hesitated again. "Some of them are useful, I suppose, but not all battles can be won with force alone." Alex approached them then, carrying another book in his hands. "I found this one," he said, showing it to Zurn. "It's about diplomacy, how to resolve conflicts without fighting." Zurn's antennae twitched slightly, a sign of interest. "This is different from what I've seen so far," he remarked. "Does your academy teach this as well?" "Yes, but not as much," Alex admitted. "Most of our training focuses on combat and strategy. Diplomacy is usually left to politicians." Zurn looked at Alex thoughtfully. "Perhaps it should be taught equally. Understanding how to prevent conflict is just as important as knowing how to fight." Emma nodded slowly, considering his words. She realized that Zurn had a point. While Fort Valor prided itself on producing skilled soldiers, it rarely emphasized the importance of avoiding war altogether. Maybe it was time to rethink that balance. After leaving the library, the group headed to an outdoor monument dedicated to Earth's greatest battles. It was a large stone structure carved with scenes of soldiers charging into battle, tanks rolling across fields, and ships sailing into stormy seas. At the base of the monument was an inscription, "For those who fought to defend freedom." Zurn stood before the monument, his multifaceted eyes scanning the intricate carvings. Freedom, he murmured. Is that what drives your people? To fight? In part, yes, Emma replied. We believe everyone deserves the right to live as they choose, free from oppression. But does freedom require violence? Zyrn asked. Or is it possible to achieve it through understanding and compromise? Emma opened her mouth to answer, but then closed it again. She didn't know how to respond. Freedom was a cornerstone of human values, but Zyrn's question challenged her to think about whether it always justified the means used to obtain it. As the afternoon wore on, Zyrn attended a lecture on advanced weaponry. Colonel Ryan Dawson led the session, showcasing prototypes of futuristic guns, drones, and other tools designed for combat. The cadets listened intently, asking questions about range, accuracy, and lethality. Zyrn watched quietly, noting how excited the humans became when discussing new ways to enhance their fighting capabilities. This weapon fires plasma projectiles capable of piercing even the thickest armor, Dawson explained, holding up a sleek device. Imagine the advantage it would give us on the battlefield. Zyrn leaned forward slightly. And what happens when your enemies develop similar weapons? Will you continue to escalate, each side striving to outdo the other? Dawson smirked, confidently. That's the nature of warfare. Whoever has the best technology wins. Zyrn shook his head slightly, troubled by the colonel's attitude. To him, it sounded like a never-ending cycle of destruction, with no clear winner in sight. He couldn't imagine his own species engaging in such behavior, not anymore. They had learned long ago that true strength came not from superior weapons, but from mutual respect and collaboration. Later that evening, Zyrn accompanied Emma on another walk through the academy grounds. The sun had set, leaving the sky dark and dotted with stars. A cool breeze rustled the leaves of nearby trees, creating a soothing soundtrack to their conversation. You've been asking difficult questions today, Emma said after a moment of silence. Do you think we're too focused on war? Zyrn hesitated before answering. I am not here to judge. My purpose is to learn, but I cannot ignore what I observe. Your society places great value on strength and dominance, yet I wonder if this focus blinds you to other possibilities. Emma sighed softly. Maybe you're right. We do spend a lot of time preparing for conflict, but it's hard to imagine a world where we don't have to. Perhaps, Zyrn said gently, but imagination is the first step toward change. They continued walking until they reached a small garden tucked away behind one of the academy buildings. It was a peaceful spot, filled with flowers and benches shaded by tall trees. Alex was already there, sitting alone and staring up at the stars. Hey, Commander, Alex said as they approached. Mind if I join you? Of course not, Zyrn replied, taking a seat beside him. What brings you here? I come here, sometimes to think, Alex admitted. It helps me clear my head, but tonight I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about preventing conflict instead of just fighting. Zyrn nodded encouragingly. And what do you think? I think it's worth trying, Alex said firmly. I mean, why not? If we can find a way to avoid war, shouldn't we take it? Zyrn smiled faintly. Your willingness to question is admirable, Cadet Carter. Change begins with individuals like you. Emma watched the exchange with a mixture of hope and concern. She admired Alex's idealism, but worried about how it might clash with the harsh realities of the world. Still, she couldn't deny that Zyrn's presence had sparked important conversations, ones that might lead to meaningful reflection. As the night grew darker, the three of them parted ways, each retreating to their own thoughts. For Zyrn, the day had been both enlightening and disheartening. Humanity's capacity for courage and ingenuity was undeniable, but so was its tendency toward conflict. As he lay down to rest, Zyrn wondered if there was a way to guide them toward a brighter path, or if their darker instincts would forever define their place among the stars. The fourth day of Zyrn's visit began with a live fire exercise, one of the most intense and realistic training sessions at Fort Valor. The cadets had been preparing for this event all week, and the air buzzed with anticipation. For Alex Carter, it was both exciting and nerve-wracking. He knew this exercise would test not only his skills but also his ability to work as part of a team under pressure. Zyrn, too, was eager to observe this demonstration of human combat readiness, though he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been growing inside him since his arrival. The exercise took place on a large outdoor field designed to mimic a battlefield. Crates, barriers, and trenches were scattered across the area, creating cover for the participants. Smoke machines added to the realism, filling the air with thick clouds that obscured visibility. Cadets were divided into 2 teams, each tasked with capturing the other's flag while defending their own position. It was a classic game of strategy and endurance, but with real weapons firing non-lethal rounds. The stakes felt high, even though no one would be seriously hurt. Zyrn stood on an observation platform alongside Lieutenant Emma Hayes and Colonel Ryan Dawson. Below them, the cadets gathered in tight groups, checking their gear and whispering last-minute plans. Alex was part of Team Alpha, led by Natasha Brooks, who wasted no time barking orders. Her voice carried authority, and her teammates listened intently. "Remember," Natasha said sharply, "this isn't just about winning. It's about proving you can handle yourself in a real fight. Don't hesitate. Act." On the opposing side, Team Bravo was led by another cadet named Jake Miller, a tall, broad-shouldered young man known for his calm demeanor. While Natasha relied on aggression, Jake favored careful planning and teamwork. As the whistle blew to signal the start of the exercise, both teams sprang into action. Zyrn watched intently as the cadets moved through the field, taking cover behind obstacles and communicating via hand signals or quiet whispers. The sound of simulated gunfire echoed across the area, punctuated by occasional shouts when someone was hit. Despite the controlled environment, the tension was palpable. To Zyrn, it almost felt like watching a real battle unfold. At one point, Alex found himself crouched behind a crate with 2 teammates. They were trying to flank Natasha's position, but she had anticipated their move and laid down heavy fire. Alex hesitated, unsure whether to press forward or retreat. He glanced at his teammates, who looked equally uncertain. "We can't just sit here," one of them whispered urgently. "We'll lose if we don't do something." Alex nodded slowly, gripping his weapon tightly. But before he could act, Sergeant Kyle Monroe appeared nearby, shouting loud enough for everyone to hear. "In real war, there's no room for hesitation," Monroe barked. "Move, Cadet Carter, or your whole team will pay the price." Alex flinched at the harshness of Monroe's words but forced himself to stand and charge forward. His heart pounded as he sprinted toward Natasha's position, dodging incoming fire until he finally reached cover. Though he managed to help his team gain some ground, the moment stayed with him. He couldn't shake the feeling that Monroe's demand for relentless aggression didn't sit right with him. From the observation platform, Zyrn noticed Alex's reaction. He turned to Emma, his antennae twitching slightly. "Why does your sergeant value aggression so highly? Is it not possible to succeed through caution and cooperation?" Emma hesitated, glancing at Dawson before answering. "In combat, hesitation can cost lives. We teach our cadets to act decisively even when they're scared. It's about survival." "But does it not create a cycle?" Zyrn pressed. "If every soldier believes they must strike first and hardest, how can peace ever exist?" Dawson stepped forward, his expression stern. "Peace is a luxury we can't always afford. Sometimes showing strength is the only way to prevent conflict." Zyrn tilted his head thoughtfully, but said nothing more. He continued watching the exercise, noting how the cadets adapted to challenges and worked together, or sometimes clashed, under pressure. By the end of the session, Team Bravo emerged victorious, thanks largely to Jake's strategic leadership. As the cadets regrouped and reviewed their performance, Zyrn sensed a mix of pride and frustration among them. That evening, after the day's activities concluded, Zyrn wandered alone through the academy grounds. He needed time to process what he had seen. The library seemed like a good place to think, so he made his way there, stepping quietly between rows of books. The dim lighting and quiet atmosphere provided a welcome contrast to the chaos of the live fire exercise. As he browsed the shelves, Zyrn came across a section dedicated to Earth's bloodiest wars. Curiosity drew him in, and he began reading. accounts of battles fought centuries ago. One book detailed the devastation caused by nuclear weapons, describing cities reduced to rubble and countless lives lost. Another recounted the horrors of trench warfare, where soldiers endured unimaginable conditions for months on end. Each story painted a grim picture of humanity's capacity for destruction. Zern sat down at a table, his mind racing. These wars weren't ancient history. They were part of humanity's recent past. Even now, humans continue to develop increasingly deadly weapons, seemingly convinced that greater power equaled greater security. To Zern, it felt like a dangerous spiral, one that could easily escalate into catastrophe. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Commander Zern?" He looked up to see Alex standing nearby holding a small notebook. The young cadet hesitated for a moment before approaching. "I saw you come in here," Alex explained. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Zern replied. "What brings you to the library at this hour?" "I couldn't sleep," Alex admitted, sitting down across from him. "I've been thinking about today's exercise and what Sergeant Monroe said, about how we're supposed to act without hesitation no matter what." Zern studied Alex's face, noting the uncertainty in his eyes. "And what do you think about that?" Alex sighed softly. "I don't know. On one hand, I get it. In a real battle, you can't freeze up. That could get people killed. But it feels wrong to ignore my instincts, especially if I think rushing in might cause more harm than good." "It is natural to question such things," Zern said gently. "Your instincts are a gift, meant to guide you. Ignoring them entirely can lead to mistakes." "But what if questioning gets me kicked out of the academy?" Alex asked, his voice tinged with worry. "They expect us to follow orders, not second-guess them." Zern leaned back slightly, considering the dilemma. Perhaps true strength lies not in blind obedience, but in knowing when to challenge authority. Leaders should encourage questions, not suppress them. Alex nodded slowly, absorbing the alien commander's words. "You make it sound simple, but it's hard to imagine anyone here agreeing with you." "Change often begins with doubt," Zern replied. "Even small acts of courage can inspire others." They talked for a while longer, sharing thoughts about leadership, conflict, and the possibility of a better future. For Alex, the conversation was both comforting and challenging. He admired Zern's perspective, but wondered if he had the strength to apply it in his own life. Meanwhile, Emma Hayes sat in her office reflecting on the day's events. She couldn't stop thinking about Zern's observations and questions. Was Fort Valor truly preparing its cadets for the kind of world she hoped to see, one where cooperation outweighed conflict? Or were they simply perpetuating cycles of violence? Her musings were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Colonel Dawson, his expression unusually serious. "Lieutenant Hayes," he began, stepping inside. "I wanted to discuss Commander Zern's behavior. Some of his comments during the exercise concerned me." Emma frowned slightly. "What specifically concerns you?" "He seems overly critical of our methods," Dawson replied. "His focus on diplomacy and restraint undermines the reality of warfare. If we appear weak, our enemies will exploit it. And if we appear too aggressive, won't that provoke conflict instead of preventing it?" Emma countered. Dawson shook his head, firmly. "Strength deters aggression, weakness invites it. We cannot afford to entertain idealistic notions when lives are at stake." Emma fell silent, unsure how to respond. Deep down, she agreed with parts of what Dawson said, but she also recognized the validity of Zern's perspective. Elaine Singh. The two was a challenge she wasn't sure she was ready to face. As the night wore on, Zern returned to his quarters, his mind heavy with thoughts. Humanity's potential for greatness was undeniable, but so was its capacity for self-destruction. He wondered if they could rise above their darker instincts, or if they were destined to repeat the mistakes of their past. For now, all he could do was observe, learn, and hope. Hope that somewhere within this complex species lay the seeds of change. And perhaps, just perhaps, those seeds might one day grow into something extraordinary. The 5th day of Zern's visit began with a heavy atmosphere. The alien commander had spent much of the previous night reflecting on what he had seen and heard at Fort Valor. He couldn't ignore the growing sense that humanity's approach to conflict was deeply flawed. While their determination and ingenuity were admirable, their reliance on aggression and dominance worried him. Today, he planned to confront Colonel Ryan Dawson and Lieutenant Emma Hayes directly about his concerns. After breakfast, Zyrn requested a private meeting with Dawson and Emma in one of the Academy's conference rooms. The space was small but functional, with a long wooden table surrounded by chairs. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm patterns on the floor. When Dawson and Emma arrived, they found Zyrn already seated, his posture calm but deliberate. "Thank you for joining me," Zyrn said as they took their seats. "I wish to discuss my observations openly." Dawson nodded stiffly, his expression guarded. "Of course, Commander. We're here to listen." Zyrn began by summarizing what he had learned so far. "Your academy trains soldiers to be strong, disciplined, and resourceful. These are qualities any species would value. However, I have noticed a troubling pattern. Your focus on conflict, on preparing for war rather than preventing it, seems to dominate your thinking. Is this truly the best path forward?" Dawson leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Commander, war is an unfortunate reality of our existence. Throughout history, humans have faced countless threats both from within and without. To survive, we must be ready to defend ourselves." "But readiness does not require glorification," Zyrn countered gently. "From what I have observed, your culture celebrates violence as a means of achieving victory. You teach your cadets to act decisively, even ruthlessly, without considering alternatives." Emma spoke up then, her tone measured. "We do emphasize caution and strategy, Commander. It's not all about brute force. Yet your methods often prioritize strength over understanding," Zyrn replied. "For example, during yesterday's exercise, Sergeant Monroe demanded that Cadet Carter charge forward despite obvious risks. Such actions may win battles, but they also perpetuate cycles of aggression." Dawson frowned, clearly irritated. "War isn't about being polite or diplomatic. Sometimes you have to take decisive action to protect your people. If we hesitate, we risk losing everything. And if you act without considering consequences, you risk creating new enemies," Zyrn said firmly. "My species once followed a similar path. We nearly destroyed ourselves before learning that cooperation is stronger than domination." Emma glanced at Dawson, sensing the tension rising between them. She turned to Zyrn, trying to bridge the gap. "What you're saying makes sense, Commander. But changing centuries of tradition isn't easy. Our soldiers need to be prepared for anything, including those who might seek to harm us." "I understand your concerns," Zyrn acknowledged. "But preparation should not come at the cost of compassion. Imagine a world where humans work together, not just among yourselves but with other species to solve problems instead of fighting over them." Dawson shook his head dismissively. "That's naive. Not everyone shares our values. Some will always seek power, no matter what we do." "Perhaps," Zyrn said softly. "But fear breeds fear. Aggression invites retaliation. If humanity continues down this path, it risks isolating itself, or worse, provoking conflicts that could escalate beyond control." The room fell silent for a moment as Dawson processed Zyrn's words. Finally, he stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "With respect, Commander, you don't fully understand our situation. Humanity has fought hard to survive. We won't abandon our ways because of philosophical debates." With that, Dawson left the room, leaving Emma and Zyrn alone. Emma sighed deeply, rubbing her temples. "He's stubborn," she admitted. "But he's not wrong about how difficult change can be." Zyrn tilted his head thoughtfully. "Change is rarely easy, but it is necessary. Lieutenant Hayes, do you believe in the possibility of a different future? One where humanity chooses peace over war?" Emma hesitated, torn between her loyalty to Fort Valor and her growing doubts about its methods. "I want to believe it's possible," she said finally. "But convincing others, especially leaders like Colonel Dawson, won't be simple." Later that afternoon, Zyrn sought out Alex Carter. The young cadet had been on his mind since their conversation in the library. He found Alex practicing marksmanship at the shooting range, his focus intense as he aimed at targets downrange. When Alex noticed Zirn approaching, he lowered his weapon and greeted him with a respectful nod. "Commander," Alex said, "is there something you need?" "No," Zirn replied. "I simply wish to speak with you further. May we walk?" Alex nodded, setting aside his gear and falling into step beside Zirn. They strolled along a quiet path lined with trees, the sound of birdsong filling the air. For a while, neither spoke, content to enjoy the peaceful surroundings. Eventually, Zirn broke the silence. "Cadet Carter, I have spoken with your leaders about my concerns regarding humanity's approach to conflict. Their responses were mixed." Alex frowned slightly. "Colonel Dawson doesn't like criticism, especially from outsiders, but I think some of what you've said makes sense. Do you?" Zirn asked, intrigued. "Why?" Alex hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because I've started questioning things myself, like why we focus so much on winning battles instead of avoiding them altogether, or why showing weakness is treated like a crime. It feels wrong." "It is natural to question," Zirn said encouragingly. "Progress begins with doubt. Even small acts of courage can inspire change." "But what if I'm the only one who thinks this way?" Alex asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "What if everyone else sees me as weak or disloyal?" "You are not alone," Zirn assured him. "Lieutenant Hayes shares some of your concerns, though she struggles to express them openly. And there may be others who feel the same but are afraid to speak up." Alex nodded slowly, absorbing the alien commander's words. "Maybe you're right. Maybe someone has to start asking these questions, even if it's scary." As they continued walking, Zirn shared stories of his own species' past. He described how they had once embraced conflict, believing it was the only way to ensure survival. Wars had ravaged their planets, leaving scars that still lingered today. It wasn't until they chose cooperation over competition that they began to heal and thrive. "We learned that true strength lies not in destroying others but in building bridges," Zirn explained. "It is a lesson I hope humanity will someday embrace." By the time they returned to the main courtyard, Alex felt a renewed sense of purpose. Talking with Zirn had given him clarity and courage. He realized that change might not happen overnight, but every step mattered. That evening, Emma joined Zirn for another walk through the academy grounds. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. A cool breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it a faint scent of earth and grass. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," Emma began, "about humanity's potential to choose peace over war." "And?" Zirn prompted gently. "I think you're right," Emma admitted. "We spend so much time preparing for conflict that we forget there are other ways to resolve issues. But convincing others, especially those in power, to see things differently won't be easy." "It never is," Zirn agreed. "But remember, even small changes can have ripple effects. Start by planting seeds of doubt where you can. Encourage others to question assumptions. Over time, those seeds may grow into something greater." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I'll try. No promises, but I'll try." As they parted ways for the night, Zirn felt a flicker of hope. Humanity was complex, full of contradictions and challenges. Yet within its flaws lay glimmers of promise, the potential for growth, understanding, and perhaps even peace. Whether they would seize that potential remained uncertain, but Zirn vowed to monitor their progress closely. In his quarters, Zirn sat quietly, gazing out at the stars. His visit to Fort Valor had been eye-opening, revealing both the strengths and weaknesses of humanity. As he prepared to leave Earth, he knew his report to the Council would reflect this complexity. Humanity was a species on the brink, capable of greatness yet burdened by its darker instincts. Only time would tell which path they would ultimately choose. The final day of Zirn's visit arrived, and the atmosphere at Fort Valor was a mix of anticipation and unease. The alien commander had spent nearly a week observing the academy, asking difficult questions, and sharing his perspectives with those who would listen. While some, Like Alex Carter and Lieutenant Emma Hayes had begun to see things differently, others, like Colonel Ryan Dawson, remained firmly rooted in their beliefs. Zyrn knew it was time to leave, but before he departed, he wanted to ensure that his message would linger, a spark of doubt or hope that might grow into something greater. Early in the morning, Zyrn met Alex near the obstacle course. The young cadet had been waiting for him, his hands tucked into the pockets of his uniform. He looked nervous but determined, as if he had something important to say. "Commander Zyrn," Alex began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about what you told me yesterday, about questioning things and planting seeds of change." Zyrn tilted his head slightly, his antennae twitching with interest. "And what have you decided?" "I want to try," Alex said firmly. "It won't be easy. A lot of people here think I'm too soft or idealistic. But maybe if I start small, I can make a difference. Even if it's just getting one person to think differently." "That is all it takes," Zyrn replied warmly. "Change begins with individuals like you, those who are willing to challenge the status quo. Do not underestimate the power of your voice." Alex nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "Thank you, Commander, for everything." As they parted ways, Zyrn felt a flicker of pride. Alex reminded him of his own people long ago, when they had first begun to question their reliance on conflict. It had taken courage then, just as it would take courage now for Alex to stand against the tide. Later that morning, Zyrn attended a farewell ceremony organized by the academy. Cadets, instructors, and officers gathered in the main courtyard, standing in neat rows as the sun rose high above them. The air was crisp, and the faint hum of distant machinery provided a steady backdrop to the event. Colonel Dawson stepped forward to deliver a brief speech. His tone was formal but lacked warmth. "Commander Zyrn, on behalf of Fort Valor, we thank you for your visit. Your insights have given us much to consider, even if we may not always agree." Zyrn inclined his head politely. "Thank you, Colonel. Dawson, I have learned much from my time here, and I hope my observations will prove valuable to both our peoples." Emma stood nearby, her expression thoughtful. She caught Zyrn's gaze and gave him a small, grateful smile. Though she hadn't fully committed to embracing his ideas, she knew his words had planted a seed within her, a seed that might someday blossom into action. After the ceremony concluded, Zyrn made his way to the landing pad where his sleek spacecraft awaited. As he walked, cadets and officers lined the path, watching silently as the towering alien passed by. Some looked curious, others skeptical, but a few, like Alex, watched with admiration and respect. At the edge of the landing pad, Emma approached him one last time. "Safe travels, Commander," she said softly. "And thank you for making us think." "It is my hope that you will continue to do so," Zyrn replied. "Remember, growth requires courage, and sometimes discomfort." Emma nodded, her green eyes reflecting a mix of determination and uncertainty. "I'll keep that in mind." With a final nod, Zyrn ascended the ramp into his spacecraft. The engines hummed to life, and the ship lifted gracefully into the sky, its smooth surface gleaming in the sunlight. As it disappeared beyond the clouds, the crowd below slowly dispersed, returning to their routines. Once aboard his ship, Zyrn settled into the pilot's seat and initiated the journey back to his home world. The stars stretched endlessly outside the viewport, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the complexity of its inhabitants. He opened a communication channel to his council, preparing to transmit his report. "Council members," Zyrn began, his voice calm but firm, "I have completed my observations of humanity. They are a species of great potential, capable of remarkable feats of ingenuity and resilience, yet their culture is deeply intertwined with conflict. They glorify strength and dominance, often at the expense of compassion and cooperation." Zyrn paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Their military academy reflects this mindset. Training focuses heavily on preparation for war, with little emphasis on preventing it. Many leaders cling to the belief that aggression is the only path to security. However, there are signs of hope. Some individuals, like Cadet Alex Carter and Lieutenant Emma Hayes, have begun to question these traditions. They recognize the flaws in their system and seek alternatives. He took a deep breath before continuing. Humanity's unchecked aggression poses a risk, not only to themselves, but to the galaxy. If left unaddressed, their tendencies could lead to catastrophic consequences. Yet I believe they are capable of change. With guidance and patience, they may yet evolve into a force for unity rather than division. As Zern concluded his report, he gazed out at the stars once more. Humanity was a puzzle, full of contradictions and challenges. They were fierce yet fragile, ambitious yet flawed. But within their imperfections lay the seeds of possibility, the chance to rise above their darker instincts and embrace a brighter future. For now, Zern resolved to monitor Earth closely. He would share his findings with other species, urging caution in dealings with humanity while also advocating for opportunities to guide them toward peace. Perhaps in time humanity would learn to balance their strength with wisdom, their courage with compassion. As the ship sailed through the cosmos, Zern allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Change was never easy, especially for a species as complex as humans. But he had seen enough during his visit to know that hope still existed. In the hearts of individuals like Alex and Emma, he had glimpsed the potential for transformation. And in that potential lay the promise of a better tomorrow, not just for humanity but for the entire galaxy. The stars shimmered ahead, endless and eternal, as Zern's ship disappeared into the void. Somewhere far below, Fort Valor continued, its operations unaware of the ripple effect Zern's visit had set in motion. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but perhaps, step by step, humanity would find its way toward a new horizon, one defined not by conflict, but by connection.